The revelation I want to share with you is not comfortable. It was not comfortable for me when I discovered it, and I do not expect it to be comfortable for you when you hear it. But it is the most financially useful thing I have learned in 40 years of this work. And it came not from a book or a course or a mentor, but from a specific and deeply uncomfortable examination of my own financial life at the age of 50. Here is the paradox at the center of everything I want to tell you. The reason most people over 50 do not accumulate real financial security is not that they lack the resources. It is that they are trying to solve the wrong problem. They are solving an income problem when they have a deployment problem. They are looking for ways to earn more when the issue is how they are using what they already earn. And this distinction between an income problem and a deployment problem is the single most important financial insight I have ever encountered, because it changes not just the strategy, but the entire direction of attention. My name is William Grant, and at 50 years old, I was a living example of the deployment problem without knowing it had a name. I had been earning a professional income for nearly 3 decades. By any reasonable external measure, I should have been in an excellent financial position. I was not. Not because of any catastrophic mistake, no failed investment, no reckless period, no single decision that derailed everything, but because the way money moved through my life had been organized around habit rather than intention, and habits that go unexamined for 30 years produce outcomes that are almost entirely predictable in retrospect and almost entirely invisible in real time. Every dollar I earned passed through a system I had never consciously designed. It moved through patterns established in my 30s, adjusted only slightly in my 40s, and arriving at 50 looking nothing like what a deliberately constructed financial architecture would have produced. The deployment problem works like this. Your income arrives. Before any conscious decision is made, a significant portion of it is already committed to expenses that were set up years ago and have continued running by inertia, to lifestyle expenditures shaped by the social environment you inhabit rather than the values you hold, to financial instruments chosen at a moment in your past for reasons that may no longer apply, to insurance products whose terms have not been revisited since a different chapter of your life. By the time any deliberate choice is possible, the uncommitted portion is smaller than it should be, and what remains is often saved or invested in ways that reflect the path of least resistance rather than any considered strategy. The result is a financial life that looks, from the outside, like the product of reasonable decisions, and that is, from the inside, quietly underperforming against what the same resources could have produced with more intentional deployment. When I finally mapped this honestly at 50, when I sat down and traced every regular outflow to its source and asked, for each one, what this is actually producing and whether it would exist if I were designing from scratch today, the picture I saw was not a picture of poverty or recklessness. It was a picture of waste, specific, identifiable, entirely correctable waste. Subscriptions to services I had forgotten I was paying for, an insurance portfolio that had been built for a 40-year-old with different dependents and different risks, and that had never been updated as my life changed around it. Savings instruments generating returns significantly below what better researched alternatives would have offered, chosen not by analysis, but by the convenience of using what was already there. Spending patterns shaped by the expectations of my professional peer group rather than by my own deliberate preferences. None of these were dramatic failures. Together, they represented thousands of dollars per year, leaving my financial life without producing anything I had consciously chosen to purchase with them. This is the first dimension of the deployment problem, and it is the most immediate. Money leaving without permission, through channels built by inertia and never revisited. Addressing it does not require earning more. It requires the specific, uncomfortable work of looking at every outflow and asking honestly whether it belongs there. Not whether it is affordable, whether it belongs. Those are different questions. Affordable asks about limits. Belongs asks about purpose. And a financial life organized around purpose rather than limits produces dramatically different outcomes from the same resources. But there is a second dimension to the deployment problem that is subtler and in some ways more consequential than the first, and it is the one I had been completely blind to for 30 years. This dimension is about the deployment of what I already knew, the expertise, the professional depth, the accumulated understanding of my field that had taken 3 decades to build. At 50, I had knowledge that had genuine market value far beyond the form in which I had always used it. I had been deploying that knowledge exclusively as an employee, trading it for a salary, using it within the boundaries of a single institutional context, never asking whether it could take forms that would generate income independently of any single employer or any single relationship. The revelation, when it came, was almost absurdly simple. The most significant underdeployed asset in my financial life was not in any account or any investment. It was in my head. And the reason it was underdeployed was not that there was no market for it. It was that I had never thought of it as an asset at all. I had thought of it as a credential, as the thing that justified my salary, that explained my professional standing, that had taken 30 years to accumulate. Not as a resource to be strategically deployed in multiple directions simultaneously for financial return. When I began treating my expertise as a deployable financial asset, when I started pursuing consulting relationships, advisory arrangements, speaking opportunities, and written work that capitalized on what I knew, something changed in my financial picture that the expense reduction and the savings restructuring alone could not have produced. Not because these additional income streams were large individually, but because they were additive to a foundation that was now being defended properly, and the combination of defending what existed and building what was new produced a compounding effect that accelerated everything. The insight I want you to hold is this. At 50, with 3 decades of professional experience behind you, you are not starting from nothing. You are starting from a position of extraordinary accumulated advantage that is almost certainly being underdeployed in at least 2 distinct ways. First, money is leaving your life through channels you have not examined recently enough to know whether they still serve you. Second, expertise and knowledge and professional standing are being used in only one of several forms they could take, generating income in only one of several ways they could generate it. Addressing both of these is not a matter of finding something new. It is a matter of deploying more fully what already exists. The compounding of those 2 corrections, less money leaving without purpose, more value generated from existing expertise, is what produced in my case a transformation between 50 and 55 that 30 years of less intentional living had not produced. Not because the transformation was dramatic, because it was consistent, because it applied the same discipline to the deployment of resources that other people apply to their earning, and discovered that the discipline of deployment is worth as much as the discipline of earning, and in some periods worth considerably more. There is one more thing I want to be honest about, because the polished version of this story leaves it out, and the honest version requires it. The 5 years between 50 and 55 were not characterized by ease or by confidence. They were characterized by the discomfort of looking honestly at a financial life that I had preferred to look at obliquely, and by the sustained effort of changing patterns that had 30 years of inertia behind them. There were months when the changes felt slow. There were moments when the gap between where I was and where I was trying to go seemed larger than the progress I was making. What kept me moving was not motivation. Motivation is unreliable, but the specific, arithmetically verifiable knowledge that what I was doing was correct, that the friction being removed was real, that the expertise being deployed was generating income it had not generated before, that the compounding was happening, even when it was not yet visible at the scale that would make it feel complete. You are 50 or near it, and you are listening to this, which means you already know that the next 5 years are going to arrive regardless of what you do with them. The question is not whether time will pass. The question is whether, when you are 55, the financial position you are in will reflect the deployment problem finally solved, or the deployment problem still running. You know which of those two futures is possible. The real question is whether you are willing to do the specific, uncomfortable, arithmetically honest work of making it real. That work starts with one thing, not a plan, not a strategy, a piece of paper and a question. Where is my money actually going? And is each outflow something I would consciously choose today if I were designing from scratch? Answer that question honestly, and the rest follows from it.